Hello and welcome to Tea and Oversharing. We are the digital support group for pregnancy, birth and the postnatal period. Every week we're going to be uploading a video to do with one aspect or other of perinatal life. So today we're talking about the second trimester of pregnancy. Sometimes it's going to be just me. Other times I'll be working with my colleague Nadia. But we would love to hear from you guys and invite you guys to come and appear on the channel with us. We are very much aware that as two white cisgender women in heterosexual relationships, we do not at all represent the full spectrum of perinatal experience. And that's without getting into all the different things that can happen during pregnancy and birth and this bit afterwards that no one seems to tell you about until you're in the middle of it. So if you would like to come onto the channel, or if there is just something you would really like us to talk about and you'd like to contribute anonymously or otherwise, do get in touch. We would love to hear from you. So all throughout the first trimester, when I was dealing with the threatened miscarriage, which I talked about in the first video, but also with just feeling so horrifically ill and drained, everybody kept saying to me, just get to 12 weeks. At that point, you'll feel safer, the placenta will kick in, your hormones will calm down, and suddenly you will emerge butterfly-like from your chrysalis of doom and glow and be all gyery. And I know that for some people it's really not like that at all, and people go through the whole of their pregnancy with horrific hyperemesis and numerous other complications. But annoyingly, I was not one of those people, and at almost overnight, at 3 months, it seemed like there'd been this shift, and my body was suddenly like, baby, not attack from foreign object, okay, better eat some pie. So that was really nice, a really nice relief. However, it also coincided with me starting to actually look a bit pregnant. And I was suddenly acutely aware that, much like getting married, having a baby seems to send everybody from your closest family to the people on the street into some kind of boundary-forgetting tailspin. So I experienced what I think is pretty common in terms of being at parties and suddenly feeling hands on my belly and having to spend dull hours talking about my pregnancy and my planned birth and blah blah blah, and tirades of unwarranted advice from aunties on the bus and stuff. But I think probably my favourite moment was when I was still in Vietnam, and one of my students was the wife of a North Korean diplomat. And my husband is from South Korea, so when she discovered this, it kind of caused her to take a bit of a step back from me. And then one day, I was monitoring whatever activity they were doing, and she pulled me aside and she said, "Teacher, I think you're pregnant." And I said, "Yes, I am." And she said, "You have put on a lot of weight," which was true. So I said, "Yeah, yes, I have." And she handed me this folded up bit of paper, and she said, "Teacher, I know your husband is South Korean, and maybe the South Korean doctors have told you something different. But in North Korea, this is how many kilos the doctors say it's okay to put on, because I'm really worried about your health." And on the one hand, I just thought, this is somewhere in the Venn diagram of hilarious, outrageous, rude, and one for the grandchildren. But on the other, I thought, she has crossed this huge socio-political divide in order to talk to me. And she's doing it kind of from one person who's been pregnant to another. And there's something really beautiful about that kind of positive, in her view, positive solidarity and yeah, kind of humanity actually. So yeah, I think that's something I'll remember forever. So it was around this time when I was staring the reality of pushing a small human out of my nether regions and getting really terrified about it, that my very wonderful husband kind of sat down with me and was like, look, talk to me about this fear and let's kind of see where it's coming from and what we might do about it. And obviously I thought the answer was extremely clear. Like, it's going to cane. But the more that we went into it, the more some quite interesting stuff came out. And I realised, for example, that I really had no clue what actually happened in any kind of detail when you had a baby. So when I'd heard women in my family talk about it, it was always kind of from the other side of a discreet veil that was drawn over the whole process by women in the "we have had children" club. So it would sort of be muttered about in a dark corner, and then my teenage self would draw near, and they would all kind of quickly change the subject, or they might say, or so and so had a tough time, but it's okay now because she's got a lovely healthy baby, and hooray! I had also seen my fair share of sitcom births, in which generally women lying on their backs in rooms full of doctors shouting at them to push shrieked comically through the pain and said very silly things. And I'd also seen a lot of costume dramas in which pretty women died prettily in their child beds so that the main character could have something to feel about. And I realised that this was not at all a comprehensive view of the physiological process of birth. And maybe if I knew a bit more about it, I might feel a bit less terrified. I mean, I don't come from a particularly reserved family. I come from a line of extremely strong women, including a grandmother that had 7 children in 10 years. And this is one of the only issues that I've ever found the women in my family to be kind of slightly reticent about. And I kind of feel like there are these two competing factions at work when women talk about birth, even between themselves. On the one hand, it is without a doubt one of the most intense and animalistic experiences that you can ever go through. And the fact of the matter is, maternity services are in crisis, and a lot of people have really quite negative experiences with them. So there are a lot of reasons why you might want to talk about your experience and seek reassurance that it wasn't just you, and try and build some kind of solidarity with people that have been through the same or similar. But then there's this kind of competing pressure to self-censor. Again, we talked about this a little bit in the first video about a very gendered idea of not making other people feel uncomfortable by referencing things that aren't considered nice. And also something that I think is like really damaging actually, the idea that having your beautiful baby might not be sufficiently great to outweigh some of the traumatic things that might have happened to you. And we'll talk a lot more in subsequent videos about some of the cuts that have been made to maternity services and the pressures that they're under, certainly for the people that are using them, but also for the people working within them, and the ramifications that this may have / is having in wider society. But for now, I guess all I really wanted to say was that by not talking about this honestly and openly, I feel like it definitely hurts the individuals concerned, because I feel like there's an awful lot of people walking around feeling incredibly isolated and traumatized by what happened to them in their birth, and feeling like they're somehow not allowed to talk about it, or that it can't have quite been as shit as they remembered. And maybe this is just what birthing is. And also there are a lot of people going into an overstretched, understaffed service blind to these issues because no one's talked to them about it. And there has to be some kind of middle way where the first group of people can share their experiences in a way that's empowering for the second group, and means that they have some idea of what potentially going into hospital might be like. It makes me really sad that talking honestly is still that much of a kind of radical act in this day and age, but it seems to be. And really that was kind of one of the aims of Tea and Oversharing, was to create a space in which we can be honest with each other about the experiences that we've had, in a way that's empowering for other people that are going into this, and that creates links between us, right from the first trimester through to the postnatal period. Because that's another thing that I find really weird, is that when you become pregnant there are kind of these groups for first time mums, and then there's a postnatal group, and never the twain shall meet, which means that this, this vast reservoir of knowledge and experience is not being shared. At some point I would love to make a video in consultation with the people on this group, looking at all of the research that people found useful leading up to birth. But for now I will give you a whistle-stop tour of some of the things that I was looking at in order to reduce my fear of childbirth and better understand the physiological process of birth and the history of obstetrics and midwifery. I'll link to all of these works in the description as well, so if people are interested they can crack on and buy them on Amazon. So I started with a book called Childbirth Without Fear by Grantley Dick Reed, and moved swiftly on to Ina May Gaskin. Ina May Gaskin, if you have never heard of her, is an absolute legend of a midwife working out of the States, where the care is all extremely medicalised and obstetrician gynaecologist led, and there are really, really high rates of interventions like induction and caesarean section there. And so for people looking for an alternative, one of the places that they go, if they can, is Ina May Gaskin's The Farm, which is this kind of country retreat where you can go to have a natural childbirth surrounded by wise women. And I started with her Guide to Childbirth and swiftly moved on through her oeuvre. But if this sounds like your bag, I would definitely start with the Guide to Childbirth, and like I say, I'll link to it in the description. I also really liked Michel Audon. He's a French obstetrician who pioneered the idea that the way that we're born is incredibly important and goes on to affect our future life. And he had ideas that are now being taken really seriously about gentle birthing, so dim lights, contact with skin-to-skin contact straight after birth, delayed cord clamping, all these kind of ideas. So they were kind of probably the three big authors that I looked at. I also spent a lot of time looking at the AIMS website. AIMS is the Association for the Improvement of Maternity Services, and you can find their website in the description as well. And Birthrights, which is, as the name would imply, a charity that aims to inform people giving birth of their rights in birth. And I also watched a documentary called The Business of Being Born, which is bizarrely made by Ricky Lake, and it looks at the medicalisation of birth in the States, but also has quite a lot of information that is relevant to people birthing in the UK context as well. please feel free to have a look through the links on the description, and to take on board any of them that might be useful for you and your interests. We like to say at Teen Oversharing that we are all about the discussion, not the doctrine. So these links were just what was really useful for me and helped me to feel a lot more empowered about birth. But I fully appreciate that that may not be the case for a lot of people. So please don't feel like this is some kind of instructional section, because it's certainly not. Thank you for tuning in to Teen Oversharing's second ever video. We'll be back next week with all things third trimester. In the meantime, please subscribe, please leave a comment, and you can also join the discussion on the Facebook group. You can find the address linked in the description to this video. See you next week. Bye bye.